and story Q&A panel. Here to answer your questions are Leonard Boyarsky, Michael Chu, Brian Kindergan, and Valerie Watrous.
Oh, wow. Okay. Pardon us, guys. Pardon us. All right. Hey, Blizzcon. I'm Brian Kindergan. I'm the lead writer on Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. And I'm going to ask everyone on our panel to introduce themselves before we get to the questions. So let's start with Leonard.
I'm Leonard Boyarsky. I'm the senior world designer.
Hey, I'm Michael Chu. I'm a game designer and a writer, and you can probably blame me for some characters like the Monk, Witch Doctor, Covetous Shen, and Zoltan Kuhl.
Hi, I'm Valerie Watrous. I'm a writer on Diablo. I work mostly on dialogue and characterization.
Hello, I'm Justin Parker. I am the historian, or one of the historians. We mostly work with the lore that's gone before and trying to keep continuity as best we can.
So Justin is a surprise last-minute addition to our panel, so that he can help with some of the really deep Diablo history if we get into that. So okay, let's just open it right up for some questions.
You have any question? Come here.
One of the things that I kind of wanted to see if you guys were thinking about, specifically with this release, is a failure cinematic. You failed to defeat Maffeo, he kills you. Instead of just respawning, do you see him destroy humanity?
Well, I don't think we'd be able to do a failure cinematic as such, because cinematics are enormously expensive and time-consuming. So even though that would be a lot of fun, if we had to do that at the expense of, say, the opening cinematic, you know, that would not be so good. Like, the only cinematic that you'd see is the failure. So we wouldn't be able to do anything like that, but we are exploring a couple of interesting things we can do when you die. Unfortunately, I don't think any of them are at the point where I could talk about them quite yet.
Hello. I was actually told to address this question to Leonard Boyarsky.
You're welcome, Leonard.
So in Sanctuary, the main barbarian is called Bulkathos. He's like the original barbarian. However, the Immortal King set, which is like the main barbarian set, it mentions Warsuk, who is like king of the barbarians apparently. But so is the Immortal King a reference to Warsuk, or is it Bulkathos, and who is Warsuk?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Warusk, by the way, is he was a king. He became king by uniting the tribes. Bulkathos was pretty much a deity, semi-deity, and he was the first one to unite the tribes. But that was, you know, way back in ancient times, and his legend of the barbarians, you know, pretty much one of their myths. And this Warusk guy came along a lot later when they were all human beings and the tribes were all warring, and he put them all together. And then after that, they had the council, like at Seneschal and Harrogath, however you say that. And so he was given the honorary title of Immortal King in reference to the fact that he did the same thing that Bulkathos had done.
Thank you.
Hello. Oh, hello. What happened to the dragon? Where's Trangul? Is he gonna come up in the expansion?
Justin, do you want to take a little bit of this?
Well, there just doesn't seem to have been an appropriate place to reintroduce him. I mean, obviously the necromancers are still referencing him and drawing on his power, but he hasn't made an appearance since quite some time ago.
So he's out there somewhere, but...
Hi. I was wondering how the Templar and Crusader differ in ideology, and will they have any specific dialogue in the X-Pack?
They do. They differ in ideology quite a bit. So the Templar is a member of an order that sort of rose from the ashes of the Paladin order, and they're a newer group, and they have, as you learned in Diablo 3, they have some very questionable practices as far as how they indoctrinate people into their order. The Crusaders are actually a group that was created at the same time as the Paladin order long ago. And they went off in the opposite direction. When the Paladins went west, they went east on sort of a secret mission. And so they disappeared into the marshlands of the east and were not heard from again for a long time. And now they've come rolling out of the east to discover a very different world than the one that they knew when they left. So they actually are sort of, they trace their origins back to the early days of the Zakarum faith. And so they represent sort of an older and perhaps more pure version of the Zakarum faith than is currently known on Sanctuary.
Hello. In Zoltan Kuhl's archives, there's a bunch of coffins that are floating in the background. What are in them? Like, what are they containing or hiding?
Michael?
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear. There are what floating in the background?
In Zoltan Kuhl's archives in Act 2, there's a bunch of coffins that are floating in the background.
Well, Zoltan Kuhl was really interested in a lot of different things. Pretty much anything that had to do with magic. He was curious. He liked to experiment a lot. And so what you sort of find around the archives are sort of what's left over from his experiments and, if just magical excitement.
All right, thank you.
So at the end of Diablo 2, the World Stone was shattered. Where is it? What is it? What happened to it?
Valerie, would you like to take this?
Well, the World Stone, as we know it, was shattered into pieces. Where those pieces are, what is being done with them, unknown at this point. Would be interesting to explore for the future, perhaps. But as far as we know right now, it's gone.
So we know that demon plus angel equals human or equals Nephilim. And when Tyrael gets rid of his angelness, whatever qualities make him into an angel, he appears human. Is what Tyrael currently is, would you call it human, or is he something else?
I think Leonard wants to answer that one.
Once again, thank you. He is not human, he's mortal. He chose the form of a human. He's always been, well, ever since the Sin War, he's been on the side of the humans. He has a lot of respect for humanity, and he really thinks humanity is, the way of the future to a large degree. And even during the cinematic between him and Imperius in Diablo 3, he's trying to convince Imperius that they should side with the humans. So he's basically casting his lot with the humans. He felt he should look like a human, but he is not a Nephilim. He never had any demon in him whatsoever. He's pure. He was pure angel. Now he's just a mortal who has a really cool sword.
So if I could, so what's the difference between mortal and human, basically?
Well, humans in the Diablo universe are half angel and half demon. So that would be pretty much it. He's not Nephilim. He's not descended from Nephilim. So he's 100% descended from angel DNA, I guess you would call it. But he gave up his powers, gave up a lot of what made him a celestial being, I guess you'd call it, to join with the humans and do what he could from that end, because he was forbidden by angelic law from interfering.
So the theme of Reaper of Souls is death, and Deckard Cain is a pretty big character in the Diablo universe. Is there going to be any reference to his death or his life?
I guess I would I would say that yes, there's absolutely a lot of references to Deckard in Reaper of Souls. He obviously was a huge part of the Diablo universe, and certainly a huge part of the events of Diablo 3. So there's no way that this expansion would be able to play out without hearing his voice and feeling his influence.
Thank you.
Hello. Deckard Cain's death felt really premature and really unannounced. Was that to make Leia's character develop it a little bit more? Develop Leia's character, maybe start a corruption or something?
That's a good question, and at the risk of wearing his throat out, I'm going to ask Leonard to field that one as well.
The reason we decided that Deckard Cain was going to pass on was we really wanted to up the emotional stakes, not only for Leia, but for Tyrael and for the player as well, because he's a beloved character. We loved him as much as everybody else did. But I think you pretty much hit it on the head. It was to pass the torch. From a storytelling standpoint, he kind of filled the same role as Tyrael ended up filling after him. But there was a lot of... we meant for there to be a lot of drama and just emotional depth with the fact that he had passed on, and this is what was kind of moving them forward. And a lot of the stuff, I think there's kind of an undertone of the fact that he might have figured out a lot of what was going on if he had been around. So it was doubly tragic that he had passed on.
Thank you so much. My question is, we know what Tyrael and humanity is going to do in response to this, but what is Imperius going to be doing to this?
In response to Malthael?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, all right. That's also an excellent question, and I'm going to ask Michael to address that.
Well, I think it's definitely a big deal in heaven that all this is happening, and a lot of the different factions are going to sort of react in different ways to all the events. Obviously, Tyrael has a more human-centric focus because he's really bet on humanity as being like this best hope for the future. Imperius, of course, is not quite as big a fan of the mortals as Tyrael is. So he's very much going to be a representative of that other perspective.
Hi. So a lot of the races in Diablo, or the classes in Diablo 3, have really long histories in Sanctuary. But the demon hunters seem to be fairly new to Sanctuary. Were they just established after the shattering of the World Stone, or what's their history?
I think Valerie can speak very well to the demon hunter.
Yes, thank you for asking. So the events of Diablo 1 and Diablo 2 obviously have started this tremendous effect on the world and all of the people living within it. And as these demon attacks were happening when you were playing Diablo 1 and trying to defeat the forces of Diablo, other people were noticing, and like our hero demon hunter, their lives were being affected, their families were being slaughtered, and these people want vengeance. So they gathered together, they went to the north, to the Dreadlands, and they started training because they knew these things were out there, these monsters from the night that maybe not everyone believes in. And they were ready to fight and to work and to give whatever it takes to take them out.
Hi. I have a religious studies question. It's pretty clear that you guys have been inspired by a bit of Christianity when creating the story of Diablo. Has there been any other religions that you have been inspired of when creating the story of Diablo at all?
Well, I think there's sort of two things. There's the Diablo universe as a whole, and then there's the particular story of Diablo 3 and Diablo 3 Reaper of Souls. I mean, obviously the Diablo universe is relies heavily on Judeo-Christian symbols and icons and iconography and all of that. But I think there's definitely a heavy world religion influence throughout. There's certain themes that are pulled from lots of different religions, and I mean, for instance, the monks have a very different, sort of a non-Judeo-Christian take on the world. In terms of the particular narrative of the story, I think the universe has kind of taken on enough of a life of its own that the story that happens in that universe is really drawing upon the universe itself, right? So the things that happen in the story are based on the kind of place that the Diablo universe is. But in the creation of that universe, there's definitely, I think there's influences from all the major world religions.
Yeah, I know, like, for my part, when I'm looking at a new culture or class or character, I really think of Diablo as it's very similar to our world, right? But with some very specific differences. Demons, angels, magic. It's sort of this awesome dark fantasy realization, right? And so what I like to do a lot of times is draw inspiration from the world and stuff, our history and our beliefs, and then sort of change them or find what's really interesting about them, and then, push them a little farther and see what that would be in a darker setting.
So I wanted to ask you about Leia's soul. Tyrael kind of alluded to the fact that, he hoped that maybe they could be able to have saved her. Are there plans to kind of give us as players the ability to maybe go back and redeem her soul?
I feel bad when you get a bunch of writers on the stage. A lot of the answers tend to be, "We're not going to say." It's just we're always trying to figure out how to share like really fun story information with you without actually spoiling things that might happen. So I would just say that right now we don't have any plans to sort of revisit what happened with Leia. I think one thing I always feel like with major characters that have suffered a sad fate in games is just that for that fate to have any meaning, it kind of has to exist for a while. I worked on StarCraft for years, and right after Wings of Liberty came out, everybody asked us, when is Tychus coming back, And the answer is, if he came back right away, then it wouldn't mean anything. So Leia is definitely, on our radar, but we're not looking at doing anything with her right now.
So I read through the Book of Tyrael on the plane here, and I know also in the cinematic you released, there's a lot of talk about the Nephilim ruins under Westmarch, and that got me thinking. Are the Nephilim, we've talked about them as just kind of like a race of powerful beings. Did they have a culture that's distinct from the cultures we see on Sanctuary now? Was there more than one Nephilim culture? Did they have unique architecture? Did they have, writing, or were they a pre-literate culture? Is there anything you can tell us about the lives of these incredibly powerful beings? And then maybe when they noticed their power going away, did that affect their culture in any way?
Absolutely, that's a great question. This is one that I feel like almost everybody on this panel probably has some good stuff to contribute. So I'm gonna kick it to Justin to start, and then invite the rest of these crazy folk to jump in.
Well, for starters, at the Drowned Temple, when they realized that their power was fading, they were obviously scared enough to make deals, panic, hide out. As far as the multiple cultures go, they were around a long time ago. It's hard to tell. I know in some things it makes it seem like it was very brief, but that was to angels and demons, who are at very least very long-lived, if not completely immortal. As far as the actual details of the cultures, I'm going to throw that back to you.
I'll jump in here. Well, the ancients were the first Nephilim. So if you think of Bull-Cathos versus Vasily, or Finsakely, however you say that version of his name, they had very different cultures. They were technically brothers, but they developed along different lines. Bull-Cathos, I don't think any of them were pre-literate per se, because they were, it'd be a very strange childhood, but they were raised by angels and demons, and angels and demons are very intelligent creatures in different ways. So they did each have. There were a bunch of different cultures. There's Esu and there's Bulkathos and all the other ancients, and that did influence the different parts of the world that they came from. Especially, I mean, the most direct correlation is from Bulkathos to the barbarians. Anybody else have anything to add?
Valerie, I think you've done some work on how the Nephilim felt when they started to become less powerful.
Yes. So if you can imagine a race of people who begin at their golden age, essentially, and then everything goes downhill from there. That's pretty much what happened after Inarius changed the World Stone. These people who are used to their power and their knowledge, their children were born weaker and weaker, and some didn't survive. So it was just this crushing development for them, which led to the splintering of these civilizations and what was essentially a dark age for the people of Sanctuary, in which their powers were lost, this tradition was lost, and only now in the events of Diablo 3 is that power coming back to humanity.
I also think in Reaper of Souls you will see a little bit more of the ancient Nephilim culture, and I think what's really interesting, the lens in which you see through at this point is they're this really ancient culture that's sort of related to us, right? But we have all this, they have all this architecture and the stuff they've left behind, and while it seems familiar to us because we share that bond with them, it's also sort of kind of weird and unknowable. So I think it's sort of, there's that aspect too that we really like to play up, the mystery.
Well, and I think the other interesting aspect that we touched on slightly, but when it's first described in the Diablo manuals and even in Diablo 3, you get a feeling that like when the World Stone was attuned to reduce their powers, that somehow everybody over the whole of Sanctuary knew about it. And that's just not the case in societies that don't have, there wasn't this big gathering where they said, hey, we're going to turn the World Stone down, you guys are all going to lose your powers. So some of the cultures knew what was going on, and some of them thought they were being struck by some bizarre plague, or they did not understand why their children were, sickly to them, which would be, probably still superhuman to us.
Hello. Who are the gods that the monks pray to, and are they influenced by the angels?
That's a great question for Michael.
Yeah, so the monk has this belief system, right, that has tons and tons of gods, right? They see gods in everything. They're like, there's a god of the forest, there's a god of the river, there's a god of abstract concepts. They have just basically a god for everything. And sort of the intention, right, is that there's idea that there are these gods of order, and then there are also gods of chaos, which, if you're observant, you'll think there's probably some sort of similarity to kind of what's going on in the overall story of the universe. So that is intended. It's sort of like, I always like to think of it that the religion of the monks is that they sort of have this really small glimpse into, the greater reality, and that's sort of what their foundation, their beliefs are founded on.
I think that goes for a lot of cultures. They kind of have, going back to the religion question from earlier, I think a lot of them, either from cultural knowledge that's been passed down, or just guys meditating in the hills and actually getting visions. I think they interpret. Each culture has their own interpretation of what happened, how the world was created, and what their gods are. For instance, the witch doctor communes with spirits, but he doesn't get a clear message from them. But he is communing with actual dead spirits, and he is getting a partial story of what went on. So it's kind of just the different ways the different cultures interpret what actually happened in history.
Hi. What's going on with Adria? Is she still backing up Diablo, or is she behind Malthael, or she went back to her lair to plan evil plans again, or what's going on with her?
Oh, Adria. Well, let's have Mike. I didn't want to throw two questions in a row at Michael, but let's have Michael answer that.
Well, Adria's a very interesting character, and she's obviously ticked us off a little bit with what she's been up to. And we've definitely not forgotten about her, and her time will come.
Her time will come. She, I think we can safely say that she is definitely still a disciple of Diablo. She is nothing if not tenacious, that one.
I would go so far as to say she has an unhealthy obsession with Diablo.
Hey guys, mine's a two-part question. Does the Angiras Council have the ability to reinstate Tyrael as an angel? And if he had been, do you feel he would have wiped the floor with Malthael?
I'll take the second one first, actually. If Tyrael had been an angel during the cinematic, he would have been able to put up more of a struggle against Malthael, but he would not have been able to wipe the floor with Malthael. And in fact, I think the events of the cinematic still would have played out the same way. Malthael was obviously, as a member of the Angiras Council in the past, was obviously one of the most powerful angels around. But since his transformation, he has become far more powerful. I don't know if we've said this publicly yet, but I think we can, that he feeds on the souls of the dead. So even during that cinematic, when he is taking in the souls of the Herodrim, he's growing more powerful by the second. And so as an immensely powerful being that is able to actually continue to grow his power, he has kind of gone to a whole new level. So he is far above the other angels at this point. So that fight still would have ended the same way.
And then for reinstating him as an angel, is that possible?
That depends. Do you mean in terms of actually causing him to transform back into an angel?
Yeah, like he would lose his physical form, put the hood back on, and just become an ultimate badass again.
No, I don't think the Angiras Council has that ability necessarily. We haven't fully explored that yet. But really, I would think that, again, as with character deaths, I think that Tyrael's sacrifice, to have true meaning, has to be something that is either impossible to reverse or at least extremely hard. It would take more than a vote of a couple of angels.
He's got to have like a Heragic hamburger too, you know.
Oh, clearly, yeah.
What happens to the human souls after they're killed? So where did Deckard Cain's soul or essence go?
Well, we haven't said where souls go, and I think for the moment we're not gonna explore that too much. I don't think we're ready to reveal the ultimate destination of human souls, but I will say that since the advent of Malthael, unfortunately, a whole lot of human souls have not gone where they were supposed to. They've ended up being consumed by Malthael. And you'll see that especially throughout the beginning of Reaper of Souls, as Malthael's minions are slaughtering people by the thousands and sending their souls off to Malthael, and he grows even more and more and more powerful. That's part of the horror of what's going on, is not just that people are dying, but that their souls are actually being consumed.
All right, so in the, excuse my voice, in the Diablo series, the hero or the player doesn't seem to really ever end up getting much love. In Diablo 1, he sticks the soul stone in his head, ends up being Diablo. In Diablo 2, you go into some portal, says Hero's End, and in Diablo 3, Tyrael takes all the excitement. So I'm wondering what happens to the hero, let's say in Diablo 2, he goes to Hero's End. First of all, where is he going? Because I kind of thought that maybe he should have showed up, and whatever character you picked in D3, you would have said like, oh, since you've been gone, all this has happened, we need you to be our hero again.
So there was a couple of questions in there. I think, so for the answer to what happened to the hero of Diablo 2 in terms of their ultimate thing with the portal. I'll ask Justin to answer that, and then we'll take the other parts of your question.
We haven't answered any of it specifically, obviously. We haven't said, the sorceress did this or did that, except for the necromancer who apparently had an apprentice, Mehan. But generally speaking, when you face the prime evils, or in this case, later on the lesser evils, it's very tiring. Most people either die, go insane, or get corrupted. So they probably needed a break from this and needed to pass it on to the next generation.
Yeah, that was a good answer. And then, as to the heroes in Diablo 3, sort of not getting as much love, and Tyrael taking a lot of the coolest, moments. One of the things that we struggle with, and I mean this is just a technical answer to a story question, but is that we can't show your character in the cinematics because they won't look like your character. We could show at the origin, at the beginning of Diablo 3, we could show each of the classes because you were just in the basic, sort of underwear that you were going to be wearing outside of New Tristram. But once you start equipping your character, we want to make sure that if they appear on screen and you're seeing them do something in a cinematic or whatever, that it looks like your character and not just generic, female barbarian number 6. So we're not able to actually show your character, and that is a huge storytelling limitation for us. And it's one that I think, after Diablo 3 came out and we all played the game many, many times, and of course saw all the feedback from the community, and really, when you work on something, you get a strong sense as soon as it's out the door of like things that you could have done better, or all of that. But those are lessons that you can only learn by making the thing in the first place and making mistakes. So I think we really felt like in Reaper of Souls, given accepting that we still have that limitation about showing your character in a cinematic, about not showing them, we wanted to find a lot of ways to make your character more important to the story and not just feel like hired muscle, like a bunch of smart people get together and say, someone should go kill that monster, and then you show up and you go kill the monster, right? That's what we wanted to make sure didn't happen. So we've been looking at a lot of different ways to try to make sure that your character is central to the story and feels like one of the main movers and shakers who's driving the story forward.
And I actually did want to add back to the first question about the Diablo 2 heroes. There is actually at least one Diablo 2 hero, which you can find out the fate of in, we had these expanded short stories for the new hero classes, and one of the fates is revealed in there.
Also,
he's not going to tell you which, so you have to go read them all.
Also,
it was the sorceress.
At one point, and we even announced it, much to our chagrin later, that the barbarian was supposed to be the barbarian from Diablo 2. And as we were progressing and making the game, we just found that we had to explain so much differently for a character that had experienced it versus characters that were new on the scene, that it was kind of cluttering things up. And we have tried different places to find different places to reveal some of these stories. And just want to say it's something we're still working on and thinking about the best way to do it without interjecting these things kind of from left field out of the story.
Yeah, I think you didn't want to constantly have something that the monk didn't know that the male barbarian does, and then the player, whoever's playing the male barbarian, doesn't get that explanation because their character should know that already.
Hi guys, I have a couple of questions if you don't mind. The first one is for Michael. So Covetous Shen is a really awesome character. He's really interesting and seems to be mysterious. Do you have any more plans for him, or any background to add in an expansion?
The answer is absolutely yes, and I think Michael can elaborate on that.
Covetous Shen is indeed a very mysterious character. I would actually go so far to say as his defining characteristics are either his mysteriousness or his hunger. But it's pretty close. Yeah, so we definitely love our side characters. We love the artisans, we love the followers, and we definitely plan on going into more detail in all of their backstories, because obviously in Diablo 3, we just sort of started introducing these characters to you. And I think we can actually talk about the fact that there are going to be some adventures that you can actually go on with your follower characters. And I'm sure actually we'd all like to talk about them. So I'll mention one of them is you'll get to find out a little bit more about Irena and the Prophet and the mystery of what happened to her sisters. And possibly Covetous Shen might get a little bit of fun too, but you'll definitely find out more about him.
Yeah, there's that jewel he's been looking for. Something about that, maybe.
He's looking for that jewel, and he probably wants to try out some restaurants in West March, though he might not have too much luck.
But the key thing, I think, is that rather than talking to your followers and artisans and hearing about their backstory sort of after the fact, I mean, you still talk to them quite a bit, but their stories actually advance during Reaper of Souls, and you're actually able to go on certain adventures with them and sort of help their story advance. And I don't know if Leonard or Valerie, if you want to jump in and mention anything.
Has anyone here wondered if the Thieves Guild will actually ever find you? Because I think they will.
And the Templars, let's say, a little upset with the Order at this point, and he's fixing to do something about it.
Sounds very cool. Which leads me to my next question, Kingsport. Okay, so the scoundrel has driven me nuts, always bragging about Kingsport. So when are we gonna see it?
When are we going to see Kingsport? Valerie, what do you think?
Well, you get to go to West March, which is very, very close to Kingsport. Unfortunately, you are very busy in West March, so you don't quite have time for that side trip. But because you are very close to the scoundrel's old stomping grounds, you run into quite a bit of action concerning his story and his past, and certain barmaids with chicken feathers.
I really think he might have been exaggerating how nice Kingsport is, too. It's been known to do that.
It does have a lot of style, though.
It's a bit of a dump, honestly.
Hi. Originally, I wanted to come up here and ask about Skos Glen and Druids as a potential future class, but I came up.
I'm gonna have to interrupt you because I can't hear you. Sorry.
Is that better?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Originally, I wanted to ask about Druids and Skos Glen, but I came up with something better. The End of Days prophecy. It is entirely dualistic in meaning, isn't it?
It's entirely what in meaning?
Dualistic in meaning. Like, people assume that the events of Diablo 3 Vanilla was the prophecy kicking off and Malthael is, Death Trail expanding his wings, but what if it's not? What if it's Tophet after all the evils are reunited?
That's a very interesting insight. I would say, prophecy is almost always multi-layered in meaning. I think it's the nature of a good prophecy, at least, that as events happen, people go, oh, that's what that was, and then they discover that actually it goes much deeper than that, and there's more to it. And I sense Leonard wants to say something.
I'm fine.
I sensed wrongly.
That wasn't a good prophecy.
But I would say Death spreading his wings is pretty indicative of Malthael, but there could be a lot more to it for sure.
Good evening. My question is very similarly. Are you guys writing the rest of the story based on the prophecy of the end days?
Well, I think the prophecy certainly plays a part in the story. It's kind of almost in a way the inciting incident, right? Like this is what kicked off these events, and this is what is supposed to happen according to this prophecy. But the thing is, the events of the story are influenced by the people who are living that story and who are going through it, right? And so what's particularly, forceful in all of this is the hero character, is your character, right? They are not going to sort of just let events unfold as they are supposed to. They are going to kind of change the entire paradigm, if you will.
Well, because as we noted in, sorry, Michael, I didn't mean to cut you off. As we noted in Diablo 3, the Nephilim aren't in the Books of Fate. So basically, the character represents this giant monkey wrench thrown into the mix here. So who knows what kind of direction he's gonna set it off, or she's gonna set it off into.
Michael?
No, that was it. Good answer,
At the
Leonard.
same point.
My second question is Inarius still alive? Inarius?
Inarius? Or that's how I say it, but I'm terrible at pronunciation. Justin?
Last we heard, he was still being tortured in hell, and while Mephisto has been busy for a good long time and then later a little bit killed, I'm sure he had someone to look after Inarius for him. He really didn't like Inarius.
So unfortunately for Inarius, yes, he is still alive.
Hi again. I wanted to get your opinion on there was some debate that came about Zoltan Kuhl's moral ambiguity. I wanted to know if you guys did that intentionally or what your opinion on it is, because when I play it, I kind of agree with him, and I'm like, maybe your plan wouldn't be that bad. But
Right. I think Michael can speak to that.
Yeah, so Zoltan Kuhl, this one does come up a lot. I guess at the basic level, it comes down to whether or not you agree to letting this guy, who is so dangerous that, the Harandrim had to, take him apart, they couldn't kill him, and whether or not you think that sort of giving him the keys to ruling the world is a good idea or not. I definitely think that what we were going for with that particular character was to sort of come up with this ambiguous character, though. At certain times, you really think, hey, he kind of has he's got a good point. I think that at his core, Zoltan Kuhl is all about humans. He's all about man. He thinks that, angels and demons are all, they can't be trusted. They don't have our best interests at heart. The only problem is that he may also not necessarily have all of our best interests at heart.
Yeah, he thinks humanity is the best thing ever, but among humans, he thinks he's the best thing ever. So part of that equation is maybe not so good for the rest of us.
But I think you're correct. We were playing with your mind.
Yeah, I would say just more broadly, a lot of our stories in our games are obviously about a fight for survival and a fight against overwhelming odds. And a lot of times that broader struggle doesn't have room for a whole lot of ambiguity in it, because you want to be fighting against something that is, from your point of view at least, evil, right? But anytime we can find a place to introduce moral ambiguity, or even just more specifically, something where there's I guess I would say valid arguments all around, and it's a chance for players to think I maybe think this guy's not so bad, or to even argue with each other. We always love that. Anytime we can have people, sort of arguing with each other about what was the best thing to do, or who was right or who was wrong, then I think that shows a greater level of engagement with the story.
Also, can you imagine if you had just let him go, he would be just following you around for the rest of the game, Reaper of Souls, always piping in, he'd always have some comment about something, and that laugh. You'd have to hear that laugh a lot. A lot.
Hi. So at the end of the first game, well, Diablo 3 that is, you see in the cinematic the Black Soulstone falling out of heaven and kind of into, it looks like the ocean or something below. And in the beginning of the Reaper of Souls cinematic, you see Tyrael picking it up in heaven. What's the story there? What's the story on how Tyrael got the Soulstone?
So it actually was, heaven is a tiered place, and it was actually falling off of one of the tiers, and just further into heaven and landed on a lower tier. And I know that that's not necessarily as clear as it could be, but really it's just tiers all the way down. And so the angels retrieved the soul stone because obviously they couldn't just leave it, lying about anywhere. And so as you saw in the beginning of the cinematic, they brought it into the council chamber and kept it there for safekeeping. And then we actually have a novel coming out that will detail Tyrael's journey into realizing that he had to reform the Herodrim and get the Black Soul Stone out of heaven. So there's an entire story there that happens between the events of Diablo 3 and Reaper of Souls. Oh, and it's called Storm of Light.
Hello again. So the Book of Tyrael was just recently launched, and it is really, really good, and I really want to thank you for creating this resource. But at the end, or near the end, there's an encyclopedia that lists a lot of different characters that are important in Sanctuary. And some of them, that's the first time there's any mention, such as this Morbed, who is super powerful apparently. Are we gonna encounter him in Reaper of Souls?
I think Justin can speak to the Book of Tyrael.
Morbid specifically will be appearing in fiction, not in Reaper of Souls. Was there other specific ones that you were questioning about, or?
Where did Morbed get this amazing power? He has necromancer, druid, and barbarian traits.
In upcoming fiction.
So his story will be told.
He had some of those hacked light items from D2, I think.
And I'm glad you enjoyed the book, by the way.
So when Tyrael ripped his wings off, he became human. Now, is that something that's only the fate of council members, or is that angels in general? And what would be the ramifications in heaven if the entire council de-winged?
I think Leonard can... I hear Leonard laughing, so I'm going to ask him to answer that.
We actually had a long discussion about that, and I said if all you have to do is take the wings off angels, that'd be a great strategy for demons. You get one in front of them waving their hands, and the other one sneaks up behind and tears off their wings. But the wings was more of a symbolic gesture. I mean, he needed to lose them to become human, but that wasn't mortal. That wasn't what caused it. That was a symbolic gesture. It was part of him shedding his angelic being, but that wasn't in any way, shape, or form the cause of it.
And you were asking about the ramifications of...
the ramifications if the entire council de-winged.
Or even all the angels, I don't know. It'd be chaos.
The world would get some really nice people, though. Sorry, mortals.
And a couple jerks.
Hi. So I noticed in the last panel that I saw that we're taking the fight to Malthael to the Pandemonium. So are we going to be visiting the Pandemonium Fortress that we saw in Diablo 2? Is that what that big structure is that we saw?
Yes. We will go to Pandemonium and we will actually visit the fortress. One of the things that we're revealing about the fortress in the game is that it is a constantly changing structure. It's for a couple reasons. One, it has been owned by both angels and demons at times, and so whoever controls the fortress tends to put additions on it and remodel, if you will. So it tends to change appearance quite a lot. But also because it's a fairly mystical place. It's not just a giant building. It actually reflects the appearance of its current owner. Whoever is in control of it actually influences the appearance and feel and even layout of the fortress. So we will be going back to the fortress, but it will not look like the fortress did in Diablo 2.
Hi. I was just wondering that Since Tyrael made the soul stones for the Haradrim to seal the 3 prime evils in, is there a reason that when the Amber Soul Stone gets shattered, Tyrael just can't make a new one?
That's a very good question. Justin?
The original 3 soul stones that he gave to the Haradrim were made from the world stones, so there's no more world stone.
So there's no way for him to shave more of the world stone off to make that.
Are you asking about when the whole thing with Tal Rasha and?
Yes, with Tal Rasha.
They were kind of under a time constraint there. Tyrael didn't really have time to go back and reformulate a soul stone, so Zoltan Kuhl kind of stepped in with what he thought was a good answer.
Yeah. Oh, I'm glad Leonard caught that. We were answering a question you weren't asking.
Yeah, I was. Okay, thank you.
But yeah, I think the time constraint is the most important part of that. They had to act very fast.
Hello. So when Tyrael shed his wings and dispersed his archangel energy, and he is essentially mortal now, why hasn't a new archangel of justice formed from the arch, from his dispersed energy?
That is an excellent question. So we haven't really explored yet what this means, that he, he became immortal, but he is still a member of the Angiers Council, right? So was he still the Archangel of Justice until he declared himself wisdom, and we haven't actually explored it. The one thing I'd say, though, is that an angel, and please, Justin, correct me if I'm making this up, but when an angel dies, a replacement is not instantly born at the Crystal Arch. I believe it has to achieve like an alignment, a perfect alignment.
When the arch decides it happens, it happens. It's not an instant.
And of course, the other part of that is that Tyrael didn't die, right? He transformed into a new sort of being. And so I think the big thing is that Tyrael's transformation into being immortal is really a completely unprecedented thing in the Diablo universe, right? And so the ramifications of it are something that I think are going to come out over time. But it's definitely not going to work the way things usually work.
Well, I think also you misspoke slightly, if I may. He's no longer the Archangel of Justice, but he is still the aspect of justice. So there's a little bit of leeway there. And everything else you were saying I agree with, so I just wanted to point that out.
Leonard.
Hey there, guys. It's me, Leah.
It's
hey, Leah.
So I had a few questions.
She's back.
Hi, I know. You can't get rid of me. So, first off, in Act 1, I say I don't really know anything about demons. But in the order, I guess that explains it. But in Act 2, I talk about skeletons. Where's the logical leap there between me not believing in one and the other? And my second question is, how do I go to the bathroom in this? Because this is bundled up tight.
Well, I will take the first part of that, and then I'm going to try to make someone else answer part 2. For the first part, I think to us, because we live in a world, at least I live in a world where I don't run into angels and demons and skeletons all the time. To me, they're all one big thing, right? And so I think, well, sure, if I believe in walking skeletons, of course I would believe in demons. But there's actually no logical leap there, because if you lived in a world where you did encounter walking skeletons, say that you lived in a town that was being assaulted by the Walking Dead, right? You would accept that as a normal part of the world. But if you'd never seen a demon before, then that would be just crazy talk, right? Like you can actually believe in the thing that you see all the time and still not believe in something that you haven't encountered.
I would actually interpret it slightly differently, in that I think the bigger issue is that she didn't believe in this overarching angels versus demons thing. The Vigerai, she knows, studying with Uncle Deckard about the Vigerai and how they summon demons or whatever these things are. It's just that her and a lot of other people just believe it's a chaotic universe. They don't believe there's any rhyme or reason to it. So it's more about what her not believing what the demons are, as opposed to her not believing in their physicality or that they exist, if that makes sense.
I was really hoping he was going to jump in to answer part 2.
I was leaving that for Michael. Michael?
I guess I'll say very carefully would be my answer as to how you go to the bathroom in that.
Probably and preferably not there.
The answer is somewhere in the Book of Cain.
So I don't know if I missed it somewhere, but at the end of Diablo 2, the player destroys the soul stones in hell and prevents them from ever coming back. And obviously they always come back or you run out of games, but how do they come back?
Very good. Justin, do you, and if you want me to toss this the other way, let me know.
I can start with when they destroyed the World Stone, it wasn't that they would never come back, it was that Baal had somehow corrupted the World Stone.
Oh, no, I think she's asking about when the player destroyed the soul stones on the Hellforge.
That actually all comes back to, I wanted to call her Magda, and that's really bad of me, Adria, who has spent 20 years setting that up. It's real evil never dies.
Leonard, did you want
to? The belief was, I mean, no one really knows what the abyss is, and the belief was that once you banish something to the abyss, it can never come back. So, as I envision Adria over the past 20 years, you know, she takes care of marking the souls of the demons that the hero killed on Sanctuary, and that were relatively easy. You know, so let's say she takes a year or two to do that. And then she, you know, goes on this worldwide hunt for the knowledge and the techniques, and just, you know, basically spends 18, 19 years figuring out a way to do this that no one has ever known before or attempted. So she basically does the research and figures out a way to actually make this occur.
And we have time for one more question.
In the intro to Heroes of the Storm today, we see Tyrael paired up with Kerrigan. If Tyrael can't handle Mathiel, could he handle Kerrigan?
Well, Heroes of the Storm is a game that sort of exists in a parallel universe. I think it's going to have its own logic and its own set of rules. But the things that happen there are not going to be canon in their respective universes. So in the Diablo universe, Tyrael would never fight against Kerrigan.
I think Brian's torn with his loyalties right now, so I will go ahead and say that I think that Tyrael could take Kerrigan.
I really am torn. Okay, that was pretty quick, actually. We do have time for one more, if there's one. All right, well.
Okay, then.
All right, run to the microphone if you got a question. Emergency question.
Go on. 59
okay.
seconds.
So I saw on a YouTube video that there may be links between Adria and Belial. Is there any kind of truth to that?
Adria and Belial. I haven't heard that one.
I think it may be because there's links from Adria to Magda. Is that?
Basically, it was saying that Belial is Adria and that the Lord of Lies could not be defeated so easily. He is way too good of a liar to be defeated so easily.
Oh, that's an interesting theory, but I hate to be too definitive, but nope. you defeated Belial for sure in Diablo 3. All right. And unfortunately, we are out of time. So thank you all very much for coming. Those were great questions. We were glad to get them.
Thank you.
And enjoy BlizzCon.
Thank you for attending the Diablo 3 Lore and Story Q&A. Up next will be a live stream of the contests from Hall D.